Hey guys, this is the second video in a 3-video series on how to rebuild the top end on a KTM 300 XCW. In this section, I'm going to rebuild the power valve and I'm going to clean up the cylinder, get it ready to put back in the bike. So stay tuned for that. For this job, you'll need a few different tools. You'll need 1/4-inch sockets with a 1/4-inch ratchet. You'll need a 3/8 ratchet with a 5mm Allen socket. You'll need Torx bits with the driver for those, a flat-headed screwdriver, gasket maker, thread locker, WD-40, an assortment of different X-Acto knives and razor blades, and also wire brushes, and a whole bunch of paper towels. So we're going to start in on the next step of rebuilding the top end by servicing the cylinder. And by doing that, you need to take off all the gaskets, clean everything, remove these O-rings. And probably the most important part is servicing the power valve, which sits underneath this power valve cover here. So to do that, you'll need to remove, there's 4 Allen bolts here. These come out. And then this cover pops off, which the power valve cover and the cylinder are machined to each other, so these are an exact fit. So they can be a little hard to separate. You can use a screwdriver, you can get in here and you can pry, and you can see that popped loose there. And then the same on the other side, just kind of give that a nice gentle encouragement. And then this power valve cover lifts away. It's also glued in place with the RTV silicone, which can make it a little difficult to pull out. So just set that off to the side. And you kind of dab it down with a rag. Get all the burnt 2-stroke oil cleaned up a little bit. What you're doing when you're servicing the power valve, for the most part, is removing the carbon and replacing the O-rings. So the power valve, main power valve here, is connected on both sides by these arms here. So in order to pull this out, you'll need to remove this Allen bolt on this side and this one on this side as well. It's useful for me when I'm doing this to keep everything lined up like I took it out, so that I don't remember or I don't forget how these things came apart. So this whole assembly will come off here. So just set that over to the side. You have a spring assembly here that we'll go over a little bit later, how to put that back together. But there again, just put that off to the side. So next, what you have is this bar here holding in the side power valve. On both sides. You have one of these each on both sides. So what I'm using is a Torx Bit. There's a million different versions of these, but I'm going to use it with a 1/4-inch ratchet, and then I'm going to try to very carefully put some pressure on this. Yeah, this one wasn't too bad. Sometimes these can be a real pain. Sometimes you have to beat on them a little bit with a hammer to get them to come out, but it looks like this one's going to be a little bit more friendly. Let's try its second one here. Yep, that one's not too bad either. That's a relief. So just go ahead and back these out. And the side power valve comes out. Flip it over. All right. Pull that out. And then the center power valve pops out, just like so. Set that down there. All right, so we got this completely disassembled. The time-consuming part of all this is going to be the cleaning portion. All of your surfaces have to be cleaned. All this gasket material has to be scraped off. You pull out these O-rings here, replace those. So look at this, the power valve, the center power valve. What you're looking for is carbon buildup. When you look at your power valve from the exhaust side, when it's closed, what you're seeing is this surface here, I believe. Yes. And because it sits in there like this. And that side is going to be clean. But what you're not seeing is this side here, and oftentimes this side of the power valve will build up carbon so thick to the point where the power valve can't close all the way, and it affects your performance. So the two important edges are obviously here. You can see where the power valve seats up against the cylinder, and this is the mating surface where the piston is riding up and down when the power valve is completely closed. So it's really important when you're cleaning these surfaces to make sure that you're not removing any material from the aluminum, because if you do, these surfaces won't line up, and you'll lose performance that way, and even worse, you could wind up damaging something permanently. And it's the same story when you're cleaning these surfaces as well. What you want to make sure, since these two surfaces are machined for each other, you want to make sure that you don't remove any material from these two surfaces. So what I'm going to do is use just a X-Acto knife, and I'm going to scrape away all this old RTV silicone. Alright, so I've pretty much knocked off all the carbon, wiped everything down. It's not spit shine polish yet. I still need to go through it and scrub on it a little bit more with some Scotch-Brite. But for now, that'll suffice. We'll need to pull out these O-rings from the cylinder head. Just get rid of those. Last time I rebuilt the top end on this, I had the stock set up. This was before I put on this upgraded mule kit, and the reason that prompted me to upgrade to the 2016 standard was because the Nicosil on the cylinder lining had actually worn through, and one of the places you're gonna see that wear is right along the top and bottom of the exhaust port. On this one you can't see it. This Nicosil is actually kind of a darker metallic color than the aluminum that you see here on the outside. But once that Nicosil runs through or wears through, you'll start to see that kind of lighter color aluminum working its way through, and that's when you'll either need to ship out your cylinder to a company that can replace or refinish the Nicosil on the cylinder, or you'll need to buy a new one. In my case, I figured that if I could make the upgrade, have a brand new cylinder, I'd spend about twice as much as I would just refinishing the old cylinder, but I'd be up to the new standard with new Nicosil. So for me, it was worth it to cough up the money for the new cylinder and the all the new components. What you'll need to do next is make sure there's no carbon buildup on the cylinder here. Usually there's a ring of it right here around the top lip where the piston reaches TDC. You can see there's a line here around the edge of the piston, and carbon will build up there. So what you'll want to do is make sure that there's no dirt when you do your final cleaning. There's no dirt in the cylinder. You'll want to get a real clean surface to work with. Use some clean rags and some WD-40 and just wipe down the inside of the cylinder here, and make sure this thing is all nice and clean. But before we do that, I want to make sure we've scrubbed off all of the carbon and gotten all this dirty stuff out of the way so that I don't track it back into the cylinder for my final cleaning. So for the next pass on cleaning these up, I'm going to be using a little bit of WD-40 and a brass wire brush, and that should pretty much take off the rest of the carbon. You could do this with an abrasion pad on a power tool as well, but for the purpose of not trying to take off too much material, I'm just going to take it easy, not try to go too fast, because you only have one shot at getting this off, and if you take off too much material, then you're just plain out of luck and you have to go and buy a new part. So I would very strongly recommend that you just take it easy when it comes to cleaning these, and make sure that you're not using any means that are overly aggressive. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. Carbon buildup is completely gone. The surface is clean. There's still a few spots that are really minor, but I'm not too concerned about that. It's not going to make any difference in the performance. So I'm going to set this one aside for now. Call it done. With this piece, it's really just a matter of making sure the mounting surfaces are clean, the mating surfaces. There is some carbon buildup along these surfaces here, but you don't need to worry about those too much. Just wipe off the carbon buildup and should be good to go. Alright, that's pretty clean. Happy with it. Shouldn't be any issue putting that back together. Likewise, you'll want to make sure that this surface is really clean as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing I did before. Just wipe all the surfaces down, scrape off any gaskets, and just clean it up. Alright, so I've got all the mounting surfaces cleaned. The next thing I'm going to do is clean the cylinder itself. And to do that, I'm going to take a clean paper towel and I'm going to douse it with some WD-40, and I'm just going to wipe down the inside of the cylinder here. The reason I'm using WD-40 is because it's really good at picking up dirt. And that's really what I'm looking for here, is any grime on the inside of the cylinder that could cause it to score the cylinder or cause any kind of premature wear. Obviously I want to prevent that from happening as much as I can, and so to do that, the best way to do it is just get in there with some cleaning solvent and just blast it out. And really the best way to do it, to know if it's clean, is to keep using clean paper towels until they're not picking up any more dirt. Of course, my can is almost out of pressure. That looks pretty clean to me. I can't feel any little bits of dirt in there anywhere. So I'll set that to the side. So the next step is to reassemble the power valve. So yeah, clean up my workstation here, and that'll be the next step. Alright, so I got everything cleaned up. Workstation's clean, ready to go. Put the power valve back together. So what I've done is I've gone through and I've put the replacement O-rings back. There's two on either side of the main power valve, and then there's one on each of the side power valves. And then these, well, they give you 5 of them, but there's only 4 that you need. Those are for these water jackets that go between the power valve cover and the cylinder. So the first step is to take the side power valves and put them back in their respective places. This one goes on this side, slides in. You have your brace bracket here. It's going to go on. And for these 2 Torx screws, I'm going to use a little bit of thread locker, just because I don't want to take a risk of these working their way out at all, because if that happens, it's going to be a really bad day for me, and I don't want that. So I'm going to avoid that, even though that might make it a little more difficult to get out next time. It's far and away better than these working their way out and causing a much bigger issue. And I'm not using the red thread locker. It's a little bit overkill in my opinion. For this, I'm just going to use a little bit of the medium strength blue stuff. And now that power valve, side power valve, is seated. Flip it over. Do the same thing on this side. Power valve goes in. The bracket goes on top of it. You want to make sure that before you get those completely torqued down, that you get your center power valve lined up, because on this bracket here there is some overlap that keeps these runners from backing their way out. So it is a lot easier to get those in place if you put the center power valve in before you tighten these down. So now you need to line up your power valves, and in order to do that, you need to make sure that when this power valve is open, the side power valve is open. So if you look through these ports here on the side, you'll see when the side power valve is open. And what these arms do is they connect to these teeth, run along with these teeth, and as this power valve opens, it opens this power valve. So this is rocking back and forth every time the piston goes up and down. And this is grooved here, so this sits in that groove, and you can see that since the main power valve is all the way open, this power valve should be all the way open. So when we check it over here, we should be able to see that that power valve is open, and it actually is. So this one's lined up square. What I'm going to do is, there again, dab a little bit of thread locker on this. And bolt that one in place. Give that a good snug. Check it to double, make sure that when that power valve opens up, everything's lined. And then you need to do the same thing on this side. The difference being, this side has a spring. So again, we're going to open the power valve, and then on this side we're going to visually open that power valve up all the way. So both of these are open, and then we're going to take and we're going to line up this piece, the connecting arm. There we go. So those two are lined up. So let's double check that. Hold this in place with your finger. And the power valve is open on both sides. Power valve, oh come on, it's closed, and now it's closed on both sides. So they're again open and then closed. So on both sides, these teeth are lined up in the appropriate places. And what we need to do now is actually a little bit of thread locker on there. We're going to get the thread started. And then we'll need to take a pair of needle nose pliers here. Get this seated down as far as we can. Then we'll need to take this tab and bend it up and over that post. And then you can finish tightening this down. So give that one a good snug. And this spring basically works to keep this from, it keeps pressure on that system that the connecting arm from the crank comes off of. So you want to make sure that's lined up appropriately. Double check to make sure that your power valves are lined up the way they should be with your side power valves. So when it's open, both of these ports should be open, and when it's closed, both of those ports should be closed as well. Everything's looking good. Next, you want to take these rubber O-rings, place them one in each one of these slots, and then with your power valve cover, what you're going to need is some silicone. There's no gasket for this. You just need to use some RTV silicone. You can use red or blue. Pretty much anything that's going to keep the grease in or the oil in is going to do the job. So what I like to do is just take some on my finger and work my way around the mating surface. Doesn't need to be real thick. You just want to make sure that it's not going to leak past the coolant isn't going to leak past those seals, so putting a little extra around there isn't a bad idea. Alright, that was probably way overkill, but I'd rather err on the side of having a little too much gasket maker than having to come back and do this again. So now, I'm just going to place this back on here. Nice and gentle. Make sure it's all lined up and seated. Like earlier, when we were taking out the head bolts, you'll want to tighten these in a cross pattern so that way it's torqued evenly. So just tighten it kind of wrist tight on each. And then you can go back through and snug those up. Just to make sure your power valve isn't bound up, just run it back and forth a few times. Make sure everything's good. Power valves are closed. Close there. It's open. They're open. Everything seems to be in pretty good working order. Next step is to put the piston on the connecting rod and then you can put the cylinder back on and slap the head on. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions, you can feel free to drop those in the comment section below. We'll get to those as soon as we can. This has been part 2 in a 3-part series on how to rebuild the top end on a KTM 300. So if you need any more information about taking the bike apart or putting it back together, you can reference either of those 2 videos. Also, if you like this content, feel free to look at some of our other videos here as well. And also push that like button and subscribe to our channel. Thanks.